In the state of Hawaii, under the auspices of the executive branch and the leadership of the governor, there is a department, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, that was the inspiration of Prince Jonah Kuhio Kalanianaole. In 1910, Prince Kuhio, a direct descendant of the Hawaiian monarchy and ali'i to his people, was the territorial delegate to the United States Congress. During this time, he saw the devastating effect of urbanization on Hawaiians. Living in crowded tenement quarters of the city, they were dying from disease and economic deprivation. He saw his people, with their deep love of the land, the Aina, separated from it and losing their connection to it. To save his people, Prince Kuhio presented to the United States Congress the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920. The act called for leasing 40 acres of land to each qualified recipient of Hawaiian ancestry, enough land to plant crops and raise livestock to support a family. Through his hard work, the act became law. Initially, the act was a demonstration project to see if his people would be successful, and the site of this test was the island of Moloka'i. The first Hawaiian homestead began on the southern coast, centered around the main city of Kaunakakai in an area known as Kalama'ula. It was called Kalanianaole Settlement. Second-class pastoral lots were the words used to label the land allotted to the first homestead on Moloka'i, an island so rocky that no one, not even a goat, can live on, was how one of the administrators of the program described the island itself. The lots were formerly a swamp with hard clay-like earth, littered with large rocks, and covered with thick kiawe forests. Purposely given land of poor quality, the homesteaders were challenged to succeed. Undaunted, 70 applicants from throughout the islands applied for 21 lots. By June 27, 1922, 8 were selected. The hunger to get back to the land and the desire for ownership was so great that Hawaiians living in the tenements of Honolulu and Hilo abandoned their trade as carpenters and mechanics. Others from rural areas who were hunters, fishermen, and farmers came as well. Once on the homestead, the whole family worked 10 to 12 hours a day, cutting and burning brush, hauling off rocks, so that the one tractor on Moloka'i could finally clear the land for crops. Almost a year later, the Moloka'i miracle happened. A bumper crop of watermelons, tomatoes, bananas, and alfalfa for livestock. By 1924, there were 37 families, 278 men, women, and children, all flourishing in Kalanianaole settlement. Unfortunately, water soon became a problem. After only a few successful harvests, the water table turned salty. The wells were sucked dry of fresh water, and ocean water seeped in. Other areas on Moloka'i were considered for homesteading. The largest was an elevated area on northwest central Moloka'i near the present-day airport called Lehua. Though windswept, the land was arable and water more plentiful. Many of the original homesteaders moved their farms to this new location while keeping their homes in Kalama'ula, or they moved to Ho'olehua completely. In 1926, the 5-year demonstration project under the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920 ended. It was hailed a rousing success, prompting the United States Secretary of the Interior, Hubert Work, to recommend to Congress its continuation and its expansion to the other islands. This was the beginning of Hawaiian homelands. Prince Kuhio, who died in 1922, would have been proud to see his people back on the land, self-sufficient, overcoming this harsh environment, thriving, raising their children to value hard work and honesty, standing tall on the Aina. The story of the first homesteaders of Moloka'i is the story of pioneers. The following are 2 oral histories shared by the descendants of the original homesteaders who settled in Kalama'ula and Ho'olehua.
Hano hanoa o haka ano, ke kani o ka ilikai. He pu'e o ne ole ia, me na paliki e ki e loa. Aina ke aloha pau ole, a o kaina anu.
I'm Alexander Bishaw. Right now we're in the home of my wife and I, and we've been on this homestead for quite a while, and this is one of our detached homestead from the original. This spot is called Lehua, and I've been here practically all my life. The only time that I'm not here is when I'm off to the military or in other areas where I had to go and come back again and reside back again on Molokai. I was actually born in Waikiki on Lemon Road, and my dad at that time was an employer at Pearl Harbor. As I was born on the first year that I was born, 1924, while he was employed at Pearl Harbor, he looked into the possibility of attaining a homestead land as he heard about it. And he applied, that is my mom, applied for homestead, and they got awarded the homestead in 1925.
I am Reverend Lehua Mokuilina of Moloka'i. I'm here in my home, Kaunakai, Kalohi Street. I was born in Honolulu, Oahu, in the Kalihi area in 1920, November 1st of 1920. And we moved here when the homestead in Kalamu'ula was opened. My grandparents moved here from Honolulu, and my grandfather was Charles Manu, and my grandma was Mary Manu. We came here, I believe, I'm not very sure, but it's between 23 and 25. And I've been here ever since. They died here on the island. My birth parents, William Solomon and Ruth Helela. But that was her maiden name, Helela. Yeah, they are my biological family, parents. They didn't come with us. I came alone with my grandma and grandpa. Because they were the ones for the homestead. We had lot number 8 in Kalamu'ula. I remember that.
When my dad first came to Molokai, and my mom, he came with some of my brothers and sisters. And I was the real infant at that time, living on mother's breast. So she cannot leave me back in Honolulu. She have to pack me along. And when we first came here, from what I understood, we stayed in Kalamu'ula in his sister's homestead. Stayed there for a while, and as we stayed there, as I understood, he worked back and forth to the homestead, which is located up here in Lehua. It's in the back area from where we are now. We are actually now. And from there, he worked until he had on his makeshift house where he can bring the family onto the homestead, and there where we live.
I grew up and there on that lot, since I can walk around, and I can remember I had good times there as a little child. And I grew up there. Finally, I went to school. The Kanakakai school, they called it, but it was down in Kalamu'ula area. And yet it was named Kanakakai School when I went there. I completed from 1st to 8th grade. Then, after the 8th grade graduation, I went up to Lehua where they had the intermediate Lehua school. They called it the Moloka'i Intermediate School at that time. And it was the 9th grade. And when they finished the 10th grade, I had already left the school because I never intended to leave my parents. They were getting old, they were aging. One thing, they were aging. And I couldn't leave them to further my education in Honolulu as they wanted me to. They wanted me to go to Honolulu to finish my education, at least to the 12th grade, I believe. But I didn't want to go because they were aging.
As I remember, from a little child, when it was told to me as I grew up, how we lived, and Kalama'ula was an area where you cannot do much farming there, but the farming that they did was out in the ocean, where they had sea life, seafood, limo and fish and all this. This was a big help to the family there. As we moved up to Lehua, in this area, we planted a garden and field crops, and we lived on that. So that was a sort of an exchange of field crop to fish from the sea. So we worked together in that manner.
We had a Filipino man that my papa was fishing game warden, and he met this man, and this man loved to plant. So my papa brought him home, made a shack for him, and he lived in there, and then he started working in the acreage that we had. I think it was 8 acres, if I'm not mistaken, if I can remember correctly. And he planted all sorts of vegetables. And at that time, I could drive, and I had a license to drive. I drove my mama to go sell our vegetables in the camps. Went up to Manolo camp, CPC camp, and that's how we make the little money. And of course, my papa was working for as a fishing game warden. He would go out to see if there's anything illegal going on with that, sort of thing in fishing. And the nets that they have, it has to be a certain something of the net, and all of those things.
My father's name was Christian Bishaw Sr. My mother's name was Henrietta Cayena. My father made a living by farming at first, and I understood him working for the county, patching old secondary roads and of this sort. And later on, in the years where he worked for the Hawaiian Homestead Commission and finished up his working assignment with the Del Monte, not Del Monte, but Libby McNeil and Libby. That's where he retired. When the land was leased to the Pineapple Company, he also had the opportunity of working with the company as labor. Yeah. And this is where his employment actually started off. But to say, from the beginning, we actually worked in the fields by ourselves when we had pineapple growing on our homestead land. And they allowed us about 10 to 15 acres of pineapple. And we did that as a family.
I married John Duvachel Sr. And we lived there my parents died. Then we lived at Kalama'ula until the problem came with the people that wanted the place. At that time, the pineapple was good, so there was money from the pineapple. And I guess that's the thing that enticed them, that they would come here, get the homestead. But like I said, Charlie Meyer was here, and he understood. He gave me a place from up Lehua. Somebody had vacated that place, and he gave me that property. So I moved up there, and we had pineapple. We lived on pineapple, what amount they had.
I spent all my years here on Molokai during my school years, from elementary on to high school. The highest I went in high school was up to my junior year, and that was just about when the war broke out in 1941. I graduated in 43, but in the year that the war break out, a lot of things didn't come into order like how it supposed to be. And as I went to my senior year, I was awarded work with the OCD, the Office of Civilian Defense. This is under the military, and I worked as a fireman during my senior year. But luckily enough, during that time when I worked as a senior, I was able to march with my senior class to receive my diploma. And after the diploma was received, then I was off to Honolulu.
What did your first husband, John Bishaw, do as work?
He was working with Moloka'i Electric. At first, he was with the Moloka'i Ranch, but then he had a better offer, I guess, then he took the Moloka'i Electric. So he worked himself up until he was a more like a chief linesman. And a few years after that, we lost him. He was electrocuted at Kalaupapa on one of the jobs that they were doing down there. It was a stormy time, and one of the boys had forgot their tool on the wire. So he's the last to take off his equipment. He climbed up to get that tool. He made it up there, but he slid. It was raining, yeah. So he slid and he fell on that wire. That's why he had in the front his heart, yeah. And he died down there. Mm-hmm.
Honolulu, I went to work for the U.S. engineers, and we built one of the runways down in Honolulu, the reef runway. We worked on that, and 3/4 ways of the runway when we were called that if we wanted to go to Guam, and the whole engineer group at that time shifted over to Guam, and then we went down to the Marshall Islands in Enewetak, and from there on to Guam, where we built the upper harbor in Guam. And I stayed there until the war ended in 1945, spent another year there up until 1946, when I came back and re-enlisted in the service and went over to Europe as an occupational force, and got out of the military in the year 1948, and 49 I was with the National Guard, just spent a year in there, and from there I worked as a civilian here with the county, and then in 1950 I married my wife, and then from there on it was the life on the homestead thereafter.
I had 6 when my husband died, 6. My eldest was 9 years old, my baby was 3. So all 6 children. So the money that we had gotten from him, Social Security and all of that, was enough. I guess because I knew, how to squeeze here, squeeze there, been noticing these things, and so raising 6 children on what he left for us.
From that time on, there was no living on a homestead or making a living on a homestead. We have to go out and attain employment from. So my employment was with construction company. I worked for the construction company. We built the first terminal that was built here on Moloka'i. We built the first Bank of Hawaii that was installed here on Moloka'i. I worked for the county as a waterworks, and this was all on part-time basis. I worked for the pineapple plantation with Libby McNeil and Libby. Later on became Dole Company. I worked for Del Monte, and all these different areas that I worked for. Part-time was also with the county on the waterworks. I worked with the waterworks. I did all of this.
I joined the church in 1939 before my husband died. He was a member of that church, and we got married in that church in 1938. Yes, Jerusalem Pomaikai, which means Blessed Jerusalem in English.
My last job that I worked as an outside employment was with the construction company, which was on the Bank of Hawaii, which we were building. About halfway through, when I was approached by a project manager at that time with Department Hawaiian Homes, stating to me if I'm interested in working for the Department Hawaiian Homes. And I took that offer at that time, and I started to work for the department in 1960. And from there, I got on as a water serviceman. I worked as a water serviceman up until 1970, where I was promoted to project manager. And from 1970 on, I worked project manager until I retired in 1985.
George Mokuilima, he was a wonderful person. When I first met him, I guess because I saw the way he acted with my children, he was a loving person. And to me, I felt that he will help me to take care of my children, and he did. My children all graduated from high school and went on their own until this day, but I lost him in, what year now? I forgot what year. Anyway, losing him, but yet he was here to help me with the children grow up. They graduated from high school, he was still living. And shortly after that, he passed on.
My hardest accomplishment that I had there was to get every Hawaiian homestead on Hawaiian homestead land. And during the time of getting into this Homestead Act, the only way that we can put new apply homestead on the land when there's a land that's been vacated or a land that's being not in use, and we only can do it at 40 acres at a time. And something was wrong in this. When one of our project chairmen for the Department of Hawaiian Home, which was Billy Bima, when she took over the reign as chairman of Department of Homelands, she made a good suggestion in that, where she said whenever a 40-acre comes back to the Department of Hawaiian Homes, where we will go in and cut up these 40 acres and award it to X number of homesteaders that can get on the 40 acres as farm lot. Farm lot at this time was either 2.5 acres or more that you can attain a farm lot. And if you don't attain a farm lot, you won't be qualified to attain water service, which is the irrigation water. Irrigation water is only given to farm lots, not domestic water. So if you 1 acre, you only get domestic water, so you won't be equivalent to attaining irrigation water.
I was a minister in the year of 1942. Yeah, before then, because I loved the work, I constantly went, and I guess that's when God saw that I was ready to head the group. So in 41, sometime in 41, I believe. And first I was made an evangelist. Then later on in years, I became the assistant pastor. Up to this day, I hold that position. Yeah, I love the work.
We changed it, like I mentioned, putting the 40 acres, cutting up the 40 acres into small farm lots, cutting up areas where we don't utilize anymore, like little parks or some of the school ground that was vacated and being relocated in another area, cutting up this area and put it into small residential lots. You take like the old hospital where Moloka'i General Hospital used to be. They used to attain a big area. When they got relocated to Kaunakakai, this area being cut up into small lots and being awarded for residential lots. And this is where we have all these lots awarded. And Kalamu'ula has the same problem there, because they were in pastoral lots. We took all these lots and we cut it up into small lots and then put it into little subdivisions. And then that's why we have in Kalamu'ula more homes that's been awarded there for homesteading.
My two babies, I would call them, Jimmy, he's an evangelist, and he is up at Mauna Loa, and he is prominently known as Uncle Jimmy of Mauna Loa. And he works out as a cowboy. He takes care of the cowboy group, and he does ministry work. Then I have the baby of the clan, and that's Claude. He is an assistant pastor with me in our church today. My eldest son served as a deacon within the church. So I thank God very much for that.
I see like Hawaiian Homestead, they want to put more residents on the lot, you know, which is something that you cannot help. You have to go because population is increasing. Yeah, so you have to look something and to allow each one of these to go on farm. We don't have the land. We don't have the land to take care of all those on the applicant list that who wants to farm to get on the land for farming. That's why I mentioned in 1974 when we had to cut up these lots in order to accommodate those homesteaders on a waiting list. But it still didn't demolish the waiting list. It got bigger. Yeah. So as it gets bigger, what you going to do now? Where's the land? So the land here, so you have to go get all this land that you say it wasn't for any kind of use. You have to put it into use for residential lots or little egg lots. Yeah. So I can see where they cut down the lots to little egg lots, well, then go into one big farm lot, which is a problem for Molokai, I would think.
My parents were people that believe in discipline. It was 3 of us girls. We were disciplined in their way, you know. They talk to us and they make us see things, you know. Be a good listener and behave yourself, you know, things like that. And perhaps they prayed too, to make us, you know, behave. But we did our thing when our parents not looking, but not this kind of things they do today, you know. We may go out and we have a good time. We enjoy with other children too. And we even grew up with other children. But no rough house like this, like today. We didn't know about this kind of thing.
When I grew up, we didn't have what we have today. Yeah? We have to live with what we have and make use of everything of what we have. But we cannot go back and do these things which we used to do. It doesn't call for anymore. Everything is getting into modernized. So if you go back to those old times, the new things will leave you more back. So you'll be falling way back, while the others are just going ahead. So I would say, just make of what you have and do the best you can.
Oh boy. I think I counted 24, I think, grandchildren. Then great-grandchildren, I went up to 54, but they were still having babies. But I remember 54, and then I stopped, but they're still having babies. But now I can count the great-grandchildren because there's only 3 of them. They're beginning that stage now. So easy to count now, but I lost track on the others. I believe should our children gonna be the one after. So should we be able to get through to them that the value is here. The value is here. Because we are lessees. Now we can transfer our lease over to the next, in line in our family. So if they're willing to go along with it and don't reach out for these other things, it would be okay. They can have. Because I think the commission is very helpful to us in that way, giving us a place to live, but it's up to us to take care of the place and how we're going to do it.